Hello, I'm George Robinson, and this is the latest in our series of conversations with interesting, exciting and innovative companies from the University of Oxford. And today I'm going to talk to Richard Pither, who's the CEO of Cytox.
Thank you, George, and thanks for the opportunity to talk today. My name is Richard Pither. I've been running Cytox since early 2013. I've been working in Alzheimer's disease for about 10 years prior to taking over the reins at Cytox, most of that with GE Healthcare. And the opportunity came along by virtue of an introduction to David Evans, the then chairman of Cytox. And I was very excited by the potential that I saw in the company. And I took the plunge to leave a big established diagnostic player for the excitement of a small startup from Oxford. So it was too much to resist. And it's been an exciting journey, and I've never looked back.
So can you tell us a little bit about what Cytox is trying to do and what is the problem that you're solving?
Well, the key to intervention in Alzheimer's disease is to find people at the earliest stages of disease, ideally before symptoms even begin. And that really is what Cytox is trying to do. And of course, if you do that, you've got the best chance to intervene to essentially either treat the disease or at least avoid the worst consequences of it. And that can be through modifying lifestyle risk factors such as high blood pressure, such as type 2 diabetes, healthy diet, lots of exercise and mental stimulation, or we think just around the corner are disease modifying drugs. In particular, a lot of focus at the moment on Biogen's drug called aducanumab, which is under expedited review at the FDA and may become available in Europe and the US as early as first quarter of next year.
So if a pharma company is developing a new drug which could potentially help Alzheimer's, what do they do at the moment? How do they find the patients? And what's Cytox going to do that will make a difference?
The biggest problem for pharma companies is to find the right patients at the right time and at the right cost. And today, pharma companies are faced with highly expensive, highly interventional testing, either using radioactive dyes to light up toxic proteins in the brain to see whether or not an individual is carrying those, or to take a lumbar puncture and test the cerebrospinal fluid for telltale signs of protein fragments that may suggest the disease is progressing. Those things are very expensive. They're very unpopular with both physicians and with patients for obvious reasons. And so what we're trying to do is put a simple test up front to avoid the need to carry out lots of those more invasive, more expensive tests and reduce the failure rate that would allow companies then to find the right patients to put into their trials.
So, Richard, at the moment, it's very expensive screening to find patients who could potentially be enrolled in trials for new Alzheimer's drug. Can you give us an idea of how much it costs at the moment and what Cytox will be able to do to change this?
Finding the right patients at the very earliest stages of disease is the biggest problem that pharma companies face today. And typically, even at the very end of that screening process, failure rates can still be as high as 80 or 90%. And that can equate to, £100,000 per patient and many months of wasted time. What we are offering by introducing our test very early and upfront of those other more invasive and expensive tests is to reduce that screening failure rate dramatically, thereby saving costs and time for that recruitment process. And that has the potential to transform the efficiency of clinical trial recruitment and enrollment into those new therapeutic studies.
What are the issues surrounding this? What are the regulatory issues and how do you plan to do this?
So we've been speaking to a large number of clinical experts in the UK, the US, Australia, and other European territories. And they all tell us that people coming in with early so-called subjective memory complaints, where individuals feel that something's going wrong, but they're not quite sure, they're a huge problem because clinicians don't really know whether they're at the high-end risk of the spectrum or not for future cognitive decline and Alzheimer's disease development. So our test is being rolled out this year in the UK, in Europe and in the United States as what we call an early clinical test, a CE mark test in Europe and a laboratory developed test in the US, so that clinicians can get hold of this and offer this to their patients from the end of this year. So it's a really exciting opportunity for us. We're working under the medical device regulations, and then that allows the initial introduction into the clinical market. And then we'll also be carrying out further clinical validation tests, which will support the reimbursement of our test that we call genoSCORE, by the way, both in European markets and in US markets towards the end of next year. So it's a really exciting time where we can actually get our test into the hands of practicing clinicians and then can start using this to the benefit of their patients as early as December of this year.
Can you tell us something about how the test was developed? Who's helped you to do it? And how do you know that it's better than anything else that's out there?
One of the most exciting elements of my job, George, is to build a team of expert scientists and then to interact with real sort of thought leaders and key opinion leaders around the world. And those have come from Oxford, Birmingham in the UK, and Cardiff, UCL in London, but also in Australia, in the US, in France, really all over the world. It's been an incredibly exciting journey to get to this point. The way we know the test works is that we've been lucky enough to be able to access samples from patients who've been on studies, on observational studies for 15 years or more. And we can access samples that were taken from them at the beginning of those studies and then ask whether we could have predicted clinical outcome from those samples that were taken long before disease developed in many cases. So that's how we've been able to validate the performance of our test. And that's the data we're taking to clinicians and pharma companies today and getting a very positive response towards.
Can you tell us something about the funding of the company? How much have you invested so far in developing this product, and what do you need to take it forward from here?
So I've been working with the company since January 2013, and we've in that time raised about £10 million in total. Much of that, 3/4 from private investors, from small VCs and angel investors. And the rest of it, about £2.5 million, from awards of non-dilutive grant funding, most notably from Innovate UK, which essentially is UK government money that's invested in new technology companies that are considered to have a very bright future and to be net contributors to UK PLC in the longer run.
Can you tell us something about your links with universities, with Oxford, and being based here in Oxford?
Well, being based here in Oxford, is hugely important in terms of access to, world-class clinical and scientific experts, on the doorstep, literally. We were spun out originally from Oxford, although our technology now embraces other universities, notably UCL in London and Cardiff University as well. And of course, as well as having that local expertise, it's also a rich source of highly skilled staff. When we're looking to recruit new people and build the team, it's incredibly important to have a location where those sorts of people are already on tap, but also a location where you can bring those people in from elsewhere, if you should choose to do so. So Oxford has all sorts of huge attractions from many perspectives.
Can you tell us something about your expectations, how the business develops? What sort of revenues are you hoping to achieve going forward, and when will you start to get meaningful sales?
So revenues will accrue from the pharma clinical trial recruitment side of the business on the one hand, and from clinical testing revenues on the other. We have some early pharma revenues expected this year, and we have verbal commitment now from 2 companies, one small biotech in Australia and one very large pharma company in the US, to use our technology as part of their clinical trial evaluation step. So that's really exciting progress for us. And they will come with fees attached to those contracts in the first half of next year. And we're also expecting early clinical sales. So we're talking at the moment with clinical sites in London with a view to beta site testing of our clinical test, later this year. And then when that's fully rolled out in the new year, we will start accruing revenues from clinical use and from private pay patients in London, across the UK, and also in the US as well.
Finally, I have to ask, how have you been affected by COVID?
So COVID has had a big impact, whether it's pharma companies recruiting clinical trial subjects or whether it's clinicians diagnosing patients. Clearly, those activities have been curtailed because these patients, by definition, are in the older and more vulnerable age group. So that has been a challenge and certainly has pushed back our revenue projections for this year. But on the upside, because our test actually can be run from a saliva sample, that's hugely advantageous because we can send kits out to patients in their own homes and those samples then can be sent off to the laboratory without them having to leave their homes and come into even a GP's practice. So the fact that we can run from, you know, that starting point, it gives us a huge advantage. And that message is resonating very well with clinicians in memory clinics and with pharma companies thinking about how best to streamline clinical trial recruitment in the future. So COVID has had sort of you know, negative, but also some positive impact on our business and the way we position ourselves.
Really exciting Oxford-based company with transformational product that could make a huge difference to people around the world. Thank you very much indeed for your time, and good luck.
Pleasure. Thank you very much, George.